Hey, and welcome to my video on the 5 steps to acquiring your domain name, your category-defined domain name, your power domain name, your exact match domain name. Could be a marketing campaign domain name. But here's the thing. At Media Options, we're approaching $150 million in domain transactions. And what that means is that we've acquired a lot of domain names in the life of this company. Personally, in the last 4 years, I've acquired over 8 figures and done over 8 figures in domain transactions. That's either buying or selling domain names. So what that means is that I've learned a lot in this process. In fact, I have over 4,000 contact points. By the time you're reading this, it's probably 10, maybe 20,000 contact points more. Talking to founders, talking to owners of domain names. And as part of this process, as part of the last 4 years of my journey in the domain space, I have uncovered and categorized 5 steps. There's 5 steps that walk our clients through that have helped me to be successful in these domain transactions. And that's what I'm going to talk about today in the next 10, 15 minutes. And the first one is this, is that you have to decide on a domain name. Now you may think, hey Chris, this is the easy part, right? Deciding on a domain name because we have our brand. And if that's the case, that's awesome, that's great. Now you're hunting a specific domain name. But that being said, there's a lot of companies who come to us who have not decided on the domain name. And that's good because the more options that you have when you start this process, the greater the opportunity, just by multiple numbers, that you're going to be successful in acquiring a domain name. I'm going to backtrack here, okay? Because I'm going to talk about how to and the metrics behind choosing a great domain. Because in the end, that domain name is your brand, right? I mean, the domain and the brand, they kind of go hand in hand. They're fluid today. I like to say that your domain name interacts at the very DNA of your brand. So the first question is this, what is a brand? What is this thing we call a brand? Now, in the essence, if you strip it down, you strip down all the descriptions, all the definitions out there, a brand is nothing more than it's a word, it's a symbol, it's a mark. It's something that differentiates and distinguishes your company from the competition. Okay, that's all it is. It's something that says, hey, this represents the mission and the ethos of our company. Now that brand, next you go to brand positioning. So then you look at, well, how well does that brand, okay, i.e. that domain name, how well does it position you in the market against your competition? Okay, we look at this in 2 different ways. Look at this from a global standpoint and from an industry standpoint. But no longer will your brand ever be seen in a vacuum today. Your brand and your domain name will most likely 80-90% of the time be seen amongst your competition, whether it be an SEO article, whether that be search, or any kind of search, right? So you're going to be seen in with your competition. So brand positioning. But really, what you're looking for is brand equity. Now, brand equity is when you breathe life into your brand, you breathe life into this creation, your purpose, your mission, and you create this value. Okay, so it's authenticity. Your brand needs to be authentic. It needs to be aspirational. And it needs to be credible. Okay, those are the 3 aspects of great elite brands. Now, brand equity is where you have this extra value to your brand. This extra value breeds loyalty. It breeds positioning. It breeds leadership. But most importantly, it breeds trust. And that trust is then carried over to carried over to revenue. It's carried over to repetitions. It's carried over to how often your customers come and recommend you on their social feed, recommend you and share your articles, share who you are and your brand and your mission and your purpose. So coming back to this thought of picking your domain name. Now, your domain name directly relates back to your brand. And that's because the internet's changed the game forever. So you're no longer being viewed in a silo today. So if you think about 10 years ago, you were viewed in a silo, right? You wanted a boat, where'd you go? Oh, there was no internet, right? 15 years ago, people weren't on the internet. So what did they do? They went to the Yellow Pages. They looked at magazines. They said, hey, we want a boat. So and they called their boat dealer up, said, hey, let me come down. But today what happened is that conversation, that first step, that conversation is being taken online. And so they search boats and they get all this. Or they search your brand Nitro and they get all this. Or you're a software company, search Nitro and you get all this. But here's the thing, once you understand brand equity and the importance of picking the right brand that can then breathe that brand equity in through authenticity, what happens is that you understand the power of domain names. So you see, your domain name is your brand. There's seven dimensions that a domain impacts a brand, impacts this thing we call brand equity, this life that you're able to breathe. I'm going to backtrack here 1 second and just talk about this brand equity. So can you imagine Google having getgoogle.com because they couldn't afford Google, right? Or the guy wouldn't sell Google. Or couldn't you imagine Amazon being getamazon.com because, hey, they couldn't buy Amazon? No, you couldn't. You can't imagine these brands not owning their branded domain online in the most simplest fashion. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the 7 dimensions of domain. I promise I'm going to get to the other 4, but it's very important that you understand this first point on deciding on a domain name because of how it impacts your brand and why it impacts your brand. So the 7 dimensions to a domain name are this. The first dimension is global positioning, and that is who owns the global positioning for your keyword online. I'm going to give one example and move on, just to keep this video series short here, but Kraken. Now, Kraken Rum launched in 2013, and they launched before the Kraken Crypto Exchange. They put over $13 million into their marketing, their advertising, the first year. So they went out big, went out bold, went out to really dominate and launch this new brand, and they put in millions of dollars in their advertising after that. But here's what happened, okay? They didn't own Kraken.com. They owned KrakenRum.com. They left open this opportunity. I don't know if it was because they didn't have the opportunity, because maybe Kraken Exchange already had it. I don't know. Maybe it was because they didn't want to spend the money, in which case I see that a lot with companies. But they left open this opportunity, this window. And the greatest risk you can have as a brand, the greatest risk is that another brand comes in and owns the global positioning for your keyword, dominates that space, and in the end makes your brand irrelevant. Now, in this case, it didn't make Kraken Rum irrelevant, but what it did do is it dominated the global positioning for Kraken Rum, for Kraken. So now if you go on and look at Kraken, you look at the first 3 pages are dominated by this thing we call a Kraken Crypto Exchange. Now, backtrack 10 years ago, backtrack 5-6 years ago, back in 2013, listen, they're probably thinking, hey, crypto exchange, come on, like this is never going to pick up. It's never going to be big. But in hindsight, now looking forward, you see that they basically created this massive risk because they didn't own the global positioning for their brand. They didn't own the .com. They allowed another company to come in and to control that keyword. Now, you're probably saying, hey, Chris, that's not a problem here because the company that owns it is small, and we dominate them. I have $100 million in funding. They have maybe $3 million in funding. I get it, but I'm going to talk about the other things here. But it's only a matter of time. That business does decide to sell at some point, and does decide to sell to a company that's stronger than you. Overnight, the goodwill that you've created, this brand equity that you created, now has a halo effect over this other company. They then take a piece of this brand equity that you built, this trust, this loyalty, this leadership, this positioning, just by default because they own the .com for that. They own the power position for that. I could go on and on about studies, recent reads. I could go on and on about Sigal and Gale. I talk about simplicity, but global positioning is very important. It's one of the reasons why you want to own your domain name online. The second one is industry positioning. I talked about this earlier. That's how well you're positioned in the industry. So if you line up the top 10 companies within your industry, how do you rank with them? Do companies, would they perceive you as being excellent? I would encourage you to do studies on this and do some research, do some surveys, just see like how does it work. You want to be positioned with excellence, and if you always go out with a get something or try something or meet something, what happens is that you look like this perpetual startup. There's a point in time when you want to move from startup into established business. Okay, that's when you go from millions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and that means you have to own your global positioning. You have to own your industry positioning online. A great example of this is Snappa bought Snappa.com, and because they realized that, hey, they wanted to move from the startup stage to this other stage. Okay, moving very quickly along here. The third one is branding, how it interacts with your brand. The fourth one is marketing, how it brings back the return on investment with your marketing. The fifth one is SEO, your ability to do SEO, and yes, it does impact it. We were the best in the most elite top SEO experts in the world, and they buy category-defining domain names because it impacts and helps their SEO. The fifth one is your ability to pivot, the fifth one is actually, the sixth one is actually your ability to pivot and expand. So Zen Payroll launches Zen Payroll, and guess what? They realized that, it locked them into payroll. Yes, they get expand, but because it was in payroll, it didn't make as much sense when they launched and did other things. So they actually rebranded Gusto.com, and the rest is history. You can check them out online, check some articles out. But the last one is very misunderstood. It's email security. And if you're on a .o, you're on a .co, you're on any of these new extensions, what's going to happen is that you're actually going to bleed emails to the .com. It happens every single day. Let's say you have an LLC on the end. Let's say you have a meet or a try or a get in front. You're going to bleed emails. I've seen actual CEOs of companies send emails to the wrong email address to their secretaries, okay? It takes 5 minutes to set a catch-all email account up, and you collect every single email, and hey, if that company's sending you the wrong email, well, that's their fault. They're spamming you. So you have to understand these 7 dimensions to a domain name. So number 1, the first step is to decide on a domain name. It's very important, the domain name that you decide. I will do a further training later on how to determine this using CPC and search to determine like what brands already have an amazing brand equity built into them that you can then capture and gives you a head start when you're launching your company. The second step is the type of owner. Now, when you're negotiating, you're trying to acquire a domain, there's 3 types of owners, 3 macro types of owners. The first type of owner is the corporate or business owner. The second type of owner is the investor. They bought this domain name as an investment and looking to make a return on it. And the third type of owner is just the personal owner. They may have bought it 10 years ago, and hey, it's just a personal attachment. They have this, they're using email and personal attachment. So each of these types of owners, they need to be talked to differently. They have different risks. And you have to understand the risk and how to talk to these owners, because if you don't know how to talk to these owners, what's going to happen is that you're going to get into the 4th step here, negotiations, and you're going to have a big fail here. So let's say you go stealth to a corporate owner. Listen, they're worried about risk. Okay, risk is the biggest thing on a corporate and a business. They don't want this domain to come back and to bite them because it's a competitor. Okay, it's easier for them to spend $10 a year than it is to make $200,000 maybe on the domain name, because the risk could be millions of dollars to their share. Could be millions of dollars just the egg in the face of the CEO and the chief marketing officer when they go before their board and say, yeah, we sold that to one of our biggest competitors. So risk is there. Now with the domain investor, obviously it's a return on investment, and you need to know how to talk to them and talk about domain valuations. And from a personal person, it comes down to this massive attachment that they have with their domain name. So you have to be able to talk to them differently. The third step here is valuations. So you need to know what that domain's valued at. Listen, if you get this stage wrong, you could spend months trying to acquire a domain name. Months. You could spend weeks. You could spend maybe $20,000 trying to acquire that and hiring a naming company and a marketing company, a branding company to come up with ideas, only be told, listen, your budget's $20,000, but the market for 2-letter domains is really in the $1 million range. There's not a chance you're going to ever acquire that. Or that one word is actually valued at $1 million or $500,000 or $200,000, and you have a budget of $20,000. Like, it's not even an option. I mean, the owners get $20,000 offers, $50,000, maybe $70,000 every week, every month. And so, I mean, they're not even going to entertain. They're not even going to start a discussion with you. So you have to get valuation right. Valuation then ties back to number 1, and that ties back to picking a great brand. Because if you get the value right, you understand that. Yes, there are some gems, or sometimes you can get some phenomenal deals. And you understand that understanding the valuation here is part and parcel to brand equity. Equity that's already built into that keyword. So it's very important to get valuation right. The 4th step to our 5-step process is negotiations. And once again, that comes back to picking a domain name, knowing the type of owner, knowing the value, and then going in negotiation and making that happen. There's different people negotiate completely differently. They take things differently. But I can tell you this. I see a lot of people who go through the negotiation process and they say, well, hey, we're just going to show this person who we are. We're going to show this company who we are. Hey, this is our company. We want to buy this domain name. And that's the wrong decision, the wrong approach to make, because if you don't use a broker, if you don't go stealth in some way, what's going to happen is that these different owners, they're going to look at this differently and say, well, hey, I would have been happy with $20,000, but you know what? I think you'll pay $1 million. So I'm holding out for $1 million. So it's very important that you negotiate correctly. Also for contracts are very important. Like I said, we've done almost $150 million in domain transactions. And the contracts, like, we have narrowed and nailed down the contracts. We have the best lawyers in the industry that have helped us to create contracts. We give you a starting point for that contract. But it's important in some instances, especially if there's owner financing involved, to make sure that the contract's worded for your advantage. that you have everything and every possibility to have the contract go in your favor. So contracts, negotiation, contract number 4. And finally, it's transferring it and make it happen. I'm on a deal right now that's has been stalled in the transfer stage. Money's in escrow. They want to sell it, but they can't. They're not transferring it. It's actually on the buyer's side, so it'll be on your side here. But transferring it and bringing it across the finish line is the most important thing. There's so many times deals get stalled up, and at the very last second. And listen, until money changes hands, the deal's not done. You need to transfer the domain name. You got to make it quick. You got to make it seamless. You haven't gotten to this point, 99-yard line, not to bring it across and hit the finish line. Okay, a lot talked about there, but those are the 5 steps that we walk our clients through. I hope you appreciate this and you like this. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to encourage you to sign a meeting up. There's a link down below, and set a meeting up with me. Set a 15-minute meeting up. Hey, no pressure. We'll go through your domain name. If it's a good fit, if you hit all of these 5, then I'd love to help you. If not, you'll walk away with at least my advice and my input in my years of experience in media options, years of experience acquiring domain names. So there's a link down below that's going to take you directly to my calendar. Okay, you're going to get my calendar to set up a 15-minute meeting, and from there we'll talk. I mean, I'd love to help you with your domain acquisition. Once again, these are the 5 steps that we go through. The 5 steps we take every single client through. Walk them all through so they know the expectations. How long could it take? Who's the type of owner? So that's it. Link down below. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected, because I share a lot of information on domain names, marketing, startups, SEO that you can use. So click the link down below and set a meeting up, and let's talk.